Welcome to the Samueletini Show, where business, innovation, and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode. And today we are going to discuss innovation with somebody that is leading the strategy and the innovation and one of the most exciting startup, or let's say now, not only a startup, but established enterprise driving EV mobility in Kenya and in the whole region. So I'm pleased to have here today Hans van Toor, who is the lead strategy and innovation at Roam. Hans, it's a pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you. Very exciting to be here and excited to have this chat with you.
And Hans, you have an extensive experience, and now you are at the forefront of a transformation on mobility in Kenya. Roam is making headlines everywhere. But before that, we want to know a bit about you. How you have, what is your personal journey? How you have entered this world of business innovation and sustainability?
Thanks. Yeah. So I started actually during my studies in engineering with the first climate tech startup, always looking at what we now call the third industrial revolution, where we started using digital, electricity, and some other key developments. Initially, mostly in the manufacturing space with 3D printing and robotics and other manufacturing technologies. After my studies, starting more with climate tech ventures. One of the climate tech ventures that we set up actually made airships, zeppelins for climate friendly transportation. We had activities in Central America, Southeast Asia, and here in East Africa. And that has been one of the key focuses, how to transport people and goods most sustainably. After exiting from the airship company, I started investing in climate tech startups here in the region with test ventures. One of the companies was Rome Electric, and absolutely fell in love with how Rome hits the triple bottom line. It combines people, planet, and profit in a way that I've never seen before. And happy to talk about that a little bit more. But what I see very exciting in this region is that you need to integrate people, planet, and profitability to have a long-term sustainable business. I decided to join Rome because of that reason, because of that impact across the triple bottom line, and never a dull day since, as they say.
And fantastic. And it's really important. We'll talk about Rome. And usually, as you said, especially in this emerging or grow market or future markets, we have to demonstrate maybe sometimes even more than in other markets that we need to do well, but also do good, or the other way. So we do good, helping people, but also do it well. That sometimes is important. And I want to ask you this before going into Rome. You had an important role, investing in climate tech, investing in the area, Asia also before, and, here Africa. So why it's so crucial, talking from your say, to embed these the three P, the three pillars within businesses in our markets here in Africa, especially?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think one of the anecdotes that stuck with me was we went on the visit with President Ruto to the US, and we spoke to the team from the White House there, and they came to visit here in Rome Park. And one of the things they said, I didn't realize that there was a green discount and not a green premium because they were used to having to battle a green premium. So climate friendly or future friendly technologies would cost a little bit more in the beginning, and you would need early adopters to drive that change. And she said, look, here you don't have that. You need a green discount from the beginning. And I think that's what exciting is that actually things like energy efficiency translate into cost efficiency. And so you need to find those synergies. And so that's why innovations that work here actually have that really accelerated growth because they're incubated in quite a challenging environment. So that cuts across transport, but also things like black soldier flies, which you see, biochar, a lot of these technologies, they are incubated in a challenging environment. And that's why if they come out of the incubation, they're actually really resilient innovations and technologies. And I think that's also what's exciting is that things that are incubated in this environment actually have a lot of potential to translate to other regions.
And it's such an important point because, of course, I would say also, especially for electric mobility, and you are working with the bottom of the pyramid. So you need to make sure you have a product that is not only doing good, for the environment and everything, but also impacting the lives, because it makes a difference from people, putting a loaf of bread on the table in the evening or not. So, it's such an important responsibility. And talking on that, can you, for the people that are not familiar, because of course, as here in Kenya, we know, but what is ROAM? I mean, what is your mission and the vision, and what are you doing, and how are you doing differently?
It's a great question. And so what we see that's very exciting is, as we know, sub-Saharan Africa, the population is growing fast. GDP per capita is growing fast. And 70 to 80% of people do not have access to motorized transport. That's changing. So people want motorized transport. And today, fossil fuel is what's driving most transportabilities. Here in the region, people use motorcycles and bus as their main mode of transportation. Electric is a solution, but today those solutions aren't really made for the region because we actually have a really high performance requirement. You know, the roads are sometimes really tough, distances are long, people carry a lot of cargo. So as an engineer, what's exciting is that that's a challenge. How do we make something that's really affordable because people need very high affordability at a very high performance? And that's what's really cool is that in this incubation, we're actually doing something unique. If we look at two-wheelers, for example, two-wheelers in India and China, they're used for commuting. So people carry maybe max 100 kgs on them, ride 40 kilometers a day. Here, well, you've seen it. Anything goes. You'll see a couch, a closet. You'll see big things carried on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And also long distances. Average distance is 130 kilometers. So we need to bring this very high performance product. And that is what Rome does. Rome designs vehicles here for the region, buses and motorcycles, which meet those type of performance. And if you look at China, China has done an amazing job at bringing these to the market. It's really across the board. Their manufacturing capacity over the last 20 years has been great. Unfortunately, what we see is that for this region, they're importing sometimes not the performance that is needed to maintain that affordability. And I think that's where at region we can really step up to make sure that motor riders, like you said, bottom of the pyramid, they need to earn. So any day they don't earn is tough. So they need performance. And I think that's what we're trying to do to maintain that performance and affordability.
And it's such an important point, because this is a wicked problem, because you need affordable but also performance. Because as you know, I mean, we work in the milk value chain, and we see sometimes we did trainings, and then you have people with maybe four or five huge cans of milk, so maybe 200, 400 liter on a motorbike, navigating these muddy roads on the mountain. So it's really important. And I want to ask. So this is, you have defined the problem, and how Roam is trying to solve this issue. Are you manufacturing here? What is your business model? Are you importing? How also you have tackled the biggest problem of that is range anxiety with EV. So when you talk with people, say, okay, but then if I go out of power, how it works?
So it's a great question, and it reminds me of an article I once read in a Dutch newspaper, and the title went, "It's expensive to be poor." And it's an inconvenient truth that actually, if you don't have savings and if your daily income is uncertain, a lot of your daily expenses become more expensive. And we've tried to look at how to make this affordable over the total lifetime of the vehicle. And a few unique insights are that one, 80% of vehicle ownership is outside of high density areas. So that means in peri-urban or rural areas, people also need transportation. For electric vehicles, you need charging infrastructure. In Kenya and across East Africa, we have the Rift Valley, as you know. So we have a lot of geothermal, we have hydropowers, we have abundance in renewable energy, but that needs to be accessible. So what we said is our vehicles need to go everywhere, be maintained anywhere, and also be able to charge anywhere. So we've changed our business model. What we see is that the common business model in the industry is to lock in users and to charge a very high arbitrage on energy. So you import a vehicle and then you charge in what is called battery swapping. And we said, that doesn't work because then it's expensive to be poor. And we don't want that. So we said, let's diversify our revenue streams. Let's earn by innovating on the product,
Mhm.
the production process, to really make that high affordable product here locally. And
Mhm.
that's the key. Cut out the margins across the supply chain and bring production here. We create good jobs in Kenya. We bring that highly affordable product with a high performance here, and we can give part of the energy revenue away so that people have a home charger. So they can charge anywhere. They can charge their mobile phone. You can charge your vehicle. And that's exciting because now we see our vehicles in Wajir, in Turkana, which are remote places of Kenya. And then we even see them pop up on our telemetry platform in Senegal, Cameroon. So people come, they buy a badge, and they bring them to where we are. And I think that model is really made for then people can actually use the product in the region that they operate.
Mhm.
Like you said, in the milk value chain, for example, people use them in quite remote areas. And imagine having solar capacity
Mhm.
for electricity generation and switching from buying fuel to having excess capacity to solar and charging your motorbike essentially for free. So those are some of the elements in our model that we have adapted to the region.
Mm, mm. And it's such an important model because usually the model we see in the market is flooded, with cheap imports, which sometimes of dubious quality from other region, while you choose the line also to create also the necessary steps here to create the ecosystem here and also the manufacturing capacity here in Africa. So also bringing not only the products, but the entire system, which is also goes a long way in knowledge transfer, in creating, the capacity also for developing and maintaining, the system. So how do you operate? I want to ask you, do you operate a battery swap station as we discussed with other people, or you recharge the system? So just want to ask a bit of this technicality.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we do operate public charging infrastructure
Hmm.
where boda riders can come and buses can charge.
Hmm.
We do provide battery ownership. So
Yes.
boda riders can actually lease to own the battery because the ownership will help them to earn more and us to scale. Because if we need to keep all those batteries with Rome, that limits our ability to scale.
Mm.
So people own that battery, can charge at home. Soon they will also be able to fast charge for a top up. So we're rolling out fast charging stations.
Mhm.
And then people can also go to the public charging infrastructure to rent. So our batteries give about 180 kilometers of range. And there's only few boater riders that drive more than 180 kilometers. If you need, you can rent a battery and you can get another 80 kilometers of range, 90 kilometers of range. So that's how we provide a hybrid structure for clients.
Mm.
I do want to come back to your question or your comment on talent here. I think
Yeah.
looking out at the factory floor, we have 230 people working in Rome, mostly young Kenyans. And what's really exciting and I think important that we have amazing talent in Kenya. And what really drives innovation in the region is the talent that we have in the company. As an example, Esther studied at a TVET in Western Kenya, and she came to us as an apprentice about 3 years ago. And recently she came with stroopwafels, the Dutch cookies, and I was surprised. She said, I now have a job as a powertrain engineer at Tesla, which is sad to see her go, but also really cool to see her go, to see young talent being able to develop the skills and find a path. And the first people are also starting to come back to Rome. They've had experience in Sweden, in other regions with Jaguar Land Rover, with Volvo, and they're now bringing that knowledge back into the ecosystem. So I
Mm.
just think that that's very exciting to see that through industrialization, through localization, we're
Mhm.
actually able to develop that skill and really create good jobs and knowledge in the region.
And that's fantastic. And then you really can see you change completely the narratives that is there, of the risk and sometimes the mystery that is for an emerging market. Why instead I think is the future of especially of our of the economic growth that is from the next maybe 5 to 10 years. And I want to ask you this question before maybe going a bit more. Are you also in your revenue strategies? Are you also tapping in the carbon market, which in Kenya is a bit hot topic, just to lower maybe the entry cost for customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Kenya has recently signed the bilateral agreements under the Section 6 of the Paris Agreement, which means that we can now start entering the compliant market. As Rome, we want to leverage that strategy because it links to the high quality carbon, which is always a little bit of a weird way of saying it. But what that means is that we can really trace how the carbon emissions are mitigated. That means that every bike is equipped with telemetry. So we always know where it is, how fast it's going, what the status of the battery is. And that means that we can show what carbon is actually not emitted. And that allows for what we call high quality carbon credits. We will directly translate that cost reduction to the end user because, as you know, the business case of electric vehicles is built up with a slightly higher upfront cost, but then a 90% lower cost per kilometer. So if we reduce that ups and runs almost at price parity with fossil fuel bikes, and this will help a lot, then it will be even more accessible for people.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think this is such an important part and an important step. And I'm also glad that you're talking to us from your factory, from the factory floor. So sometimes also the signal and the thing is not perfect, but you are there. We hear also the innovation at work when you are talking and the real work that you are doing. And on that, I want to ask, can you share maybe some stories or example that they really touched your heart on your journey into Rome or some important milestones?
Yeah, well, maybe starting one step before, like what I've seen is that entrepreneurship is generally a very tough journey. It's a lonely journey and it requires a lot of grit wherever you do it. I think coming here to the region, I have a lot of respect for people who start companies and build companies here in the region because it is one of the toughest things that I've seen in the world and it requires a lot of grit. So the entrepreneurs, not only in transportation, but in agriculture and logistics, people who really try to build businesses here, which is often not behind the desk, but out there. I think that's really exciting and that's what we need more. And we have a lot of people who work in the development finance institutional space, in the finance space, in other regions and they provide a great contribution. But I really see that the grit and the determination in the entrepreneurship space is really what is needed in the ecosystem. So I would encourage everyone to get off behind their desks and start a business. On the success stories, I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about, as you probably have heard, is creating good high value jobs in the ecosystem. What we see is that through industrialization, people are starting to realize that Kenya actually has a unique position in this space. We have a lot of renewable energy, which is consistent and affordable. We have amazing talent. We have a finance ecosystem that can drive successes. So where I've seen the most success is on this industrialization piece. And there's been industrial policy to drive this, a legal notice 112 and 84, which have kickstarted the component manufacturing ecosystem. And today you can get automotive components at cost and at quality to China and India. And I think that's such a great revelation that we can compete with the international market. And I really hope that we can continue to drive that change to build a further industrial base.
And this is such an important point because it's really changed the narrative and really creates the base and really the objective that's there here. This is the grow market. We are no longer the potential, the discussion, the African century from IMF, but it's making, it's working, and you are one of the people together with the team and the many workers that are with you now there. You are a testimony, of this work. And I want to ask this question. How do you see the future? You mentioned a bit, but how do you see the future, especially for this electric mobility revolution in Africa, which will go also a long way to cut the dependency of fossil fuel? Because we know, for example, here in Kenya, we import everything or almost everything. So it will also help a lot the development of the economy.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I like how you phrase it: growth economies as opposed to developing economies. And there is growth. 17% of the economy in Kenya is formal. So there's only a very small fiscal income base that the government can work with. And 70% of the government budget is used to pay off debt. So actually, the country is performing exceptionally well with the small budget that we have. And one of the things that we're trying to do is see if the World Bank, IMF, and other international stakeholders can support with policy developments to provide some concessionality based on an industrial policy. So, what does that mean? If we create more jobs, if we attract more foreign direct investment, if we build that industrial base here, the risk of investment also goes down. The fiscal income base goes up. So, the debt is actually at a lower risk. So, what we're trying to build and what we're seeing positive developments of is that trend. And I think it's also an ask to policymakers, to DFIs, is to support that trend, to be aware of the potential risks of importation, to avoid the fallacy of saying, let's do this first, because internationally we've seen this doesn't work. If you look at charts from GDP per capita in the 1960s, 70s, in Southeast Asia and in Kenya, most countries started at a similar GDP per capita, but Southeast Asia has developed so fast by industrializing. And I think that time is now. So what we see is electric vehicle manufacturing and assembly can really drive that growth. We see that Kenya and East Africa has a really unique and positive position in that today. And we're very keen to keep supporting that. As the chair of the EV subsector at Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we work with industry, policy, and government to drive this change. And we're seeing that this is happening, and we're very hopeful that this will continue.
And this is such an important point. We know in the case study in the academia, we see that textiles, sometimes we look at the Bangladesh or others. But I would rather prefer EV to be the driver, not the sweatshop model. That, I would argue it is not the best path for development that has been chosen for many areas, which has poisoned the environment and had created huge inequalities, notwithstanding also the dramatic scene that we know, the Rana Plaza and others, for example, using Bangladesh as an example. So, in your role as chair, in the Kenya Association of Manufacturers for the EV, and I think EV and new technology and innovation can be really, let's say, the push forward towards a different industrialization, not a dirty one and a clean one. Which are also the policy, the constraints and the opportunities that you see in that space, and how are you acting really to reshape the environment?
So it's a good question, and I think it's challenging. I must say, there's a lot of different incentives in the ecosystem, and it's not always easy to change from the old to the new. I think that it cuts across small ecosystems, large ecosystems, growing economies, and more set economies. And what I really like is that there is such a positive momentum because in electric mobility, there's something for everyone. It creates good jobs if done well. It changes foreign currency being spent on importing fuel. So it has all of these economic drivers, it has social drivers, it has climate drivers. I do think that there's legacy stakeholder systems that are sometimes incentivized on different revenue streams, different production technologies, etc. So that is challenging. But what is exciting is that it is inevitable. People are seeing that this won't go away. If we look at the numbers of electric vehicles coming to market in Kenya, 80-90% of electric vehicles are being sold in Nairobi. And Nairobi is only about 20% of the market in Kenya. So actually what we're seeing that the numbers that sometimes comes out are a bit skewed because almost 30-40% of new registrations of motorbikes is electric. So it has reached critical mass and there's no denying it. So what's exciting is that it's a matter of time. It takes a lot of effort and time to develop the policies to bring the legacy stakeholders and the new stakeholders together. But what is exciting is that the critical mass is there. And I think everybody acknowledges it, that this is inevitable.
And this is such a powerful message and an open message. And I really like the importance, also to expand, from the Nairobi center now going into the areas where it also is such an important, as is, for example, where I stand now, the importance of having also electrification in value chains, electrification in the rural transport, which will make also a long way to reduce costs and put in more money into the pockets of people. And looking at the future, on this, how do you see this, let's say, grow market or future markets evolving within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we recently did a study with FCDO and Manufacturing Africa to look at if we can continue on the path of local content development. What would that mean for the ecosystem? And today, Rome is at about 40% local content, which, if you consider the battery is almost half of the value of a motorcycle, it's significant. Our ambition is to get to 70% local content by 2030. This would mean that one job created in Rome would be 22 jobs in the ecosystem, which is a very high multiple. And we engage on platforms with Asia, with China, with the US. And as you know, there's a lot of geopolitical influence in the region today because we have a lot of critical minerals and we actually have the potential to make EV components in the region. Today, we export critical minerals to China only to import batteries back. And when we engage with the US, they want the Lobito corridor to export critical minerals to the US. China wants them to go out through Dar.
Mm.
The future that we see would be, can we process them here? Can we add value and start exporting a high value components? And that's the path that we want to be on. And that's the path that together with a larger ecosystem of academic partners, industry, policymakers, we are trying to build. And that's a future that we now actually start to see happening. So that's a very exciting opportunity. For Rome specifically, we are expanding fast. We were recently awarded the fastest growing manufacturing company in sub-Saharan Africa by the Financial Times. So as Rome, it's very exciting. I'm looking at the factory. I see bikes rolling off the line at an increasing speed. We have bikes end to end in the factory waiting for customers to be picked up. So I think it's a very exciting future ahead of us.
And what you said is such important. It's often not known. I'm sure maybe some of the listeners, especially maybe in the what's called the Northern Hemisphere and others, they don't know. But what you said is really critical. So instead of an exporter of just the raw material, especially these critical materials, becoming a manufacturing hub will go a long way to really transform the narrative of Africa and also give a future, especially for a huge base, a population base, a youth population that is in the area. So rather than just maybe building, as many are proposing, a big railway, a big port from each whatever side and whatever the ship is bounded to, be east or west, maybe it's better to build the factory and build the capacity. It will be a much more action towards a sustainable and proper development. And Hans, I mean, I have no word to say how we can thank you because of this. Is this episode has been so full of insights and so full of the nitty and gritty, on how you transform and have a vision for the future. If you have to give one insight or one lesson that you have learned from your many venture and many work, which one would you like to leave to our listener, especially the one, as you said, you mentioned before, they want to start the business because that is where entrepreneurship can really develop our areas.
Yeah, it's a great question and one we could have another episode on, but I'll try to be short and concise.
Yeah.
I think to put it in one word, trust. I see trust is needed. Trust links to the cost of capital and access to capital. Trust leads to the productivity and innovation in an ecosystem in a company. Sometimes we misperceive the region in trust, and that creates some inefficiencies in the ecosystem. I think what I'm excited about is that in with a high trust, we get amazing things done. So the message I would say is to make sure that we trust, we put the right risk profile on investments in the region, and then actually build together. And that's what I'm seeing in the EV industry. And so that will be my parting word.
And Hans, thank you so much for this amazing episode. Thank you so much for taking your time from the factory floor, from where the bikes are coming out, the batteries, the buses, and the future of this EV revolution in Kenya, in the region, is coming to take time and share your insights and work. It has been an honor and pleasure having you at the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. We're very exciting and we hope to see you in the factory soon. And for all listeners, we're in Nairobi and we will be very happy to welcome you in Rome Park. Thank you.
Fantastic. Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.